The lesson today that we are going to go over is about conducting research. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the different types of research, and so that will look at the different levels of research that are done and the types of sources that you might find. Then we'll talk a little bit about the research process, which is the steps that you would take for you as someone conducting a research project, everywhere from the initial topic all the way through to finding your sources. Then the second half of this lesson gives you a little bit of a walkthrough of the Niagara College Library database, and it tells you some information about how to get started using the everything search, which is also known as Page 1+. And then at the end, there are some links to some helpful resources to help you in your research process. Before we start getting into what types of research exist and how to start the research process, it's really important that before you start doing any research, you make sure you understand your research task and topic. So if this is for an assignment, make sure that you read all of your instructions carefully and make sure that you understand and know what background information and resources you need to have access to, if they are provided, and if that's applicable. The next thing you want to do is define your topic. So make sure that you, in your own words, have a clear understanding of what your assignment is. What have you been asked to write about? Why do you need to write about that? What is the purpose of doing this writing assignment? These questions will help you focus on the purpose of your writing. And then what is expected from you in terms of what you need to produce? Keep the page limit in mind when you are doing research. So if you've been asked to write a paragraph, stick to one paragraph. There will be some resources on Brightspace that show some examples of a research paragraph, so you can get an idea of the approximate length, keeping in mind that paragraphs tend to vary in length, but that gives you an idea. And for an essay, so make sure that you know what the page limit or word limit is. And that really helps you when you're trying to narrow down your sources that you're going to use. So for example, you cannot be expected or expect yourself to write about vaccines, just in general, in a 3 to 5 page essay. That would be too broad of a topic for such a limited page number. But you could write about, say, the COVID-19 vaccines and explore 3 main factors that contribute to immunization hesitance in young adults in Canada. So the page length should help you to determine the focus and how specific you need to get. The shorter your topic, the shorter your page number, really the more specific your focus should be. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of sources that you might encounter in your research. One of the most common that you're likely to find are primary sources, and these are first-hand accounts or observations of an event. So what this means is that the information is coming directly from the original source, and it hasn't been filtered through any kind of editing process where information from multiple sources has been compiled or the information has been then synthesized. This is different from peer review. Peer review is definitely an important part, but that comes in all types of sources. But primary sources would be like empirical research, interviews, speeches, anything where the person that is the author or the owner of the information is giving that information directly to you. Secondary resources typically take primary resources and then perform some kind of review or analysis. So that would be like a literature review or biographies, editorials, or periodicals like scholarly journals. So anytime that there is an interpretation of primary sources without offering new data would be a secondary source. The type of information that you do, the type of assignments you do, if you are taking primary sources and then analyzing the data from those primary sources, maybe synthesizing the information across multiple sources, that would be secondary research that you are performing. Then you have tertiary sources, which are a compilation of information that comes from secondary and primary sources. And these could be collections or lists, and they're generally reference material that you can access to help you find information or direct you to other types of sources. So this would be like databases, catalogs, encyclopedias. Let's start talking about the research journey, and we call it a journey because it is an ongoing process. Research is not something that you spend a little bit of time in the beginning and then you're done. Research will continue to take place as you progress through your work. So if you are thinking about, let's say, an essay, and you're going to write a research essay, you have to choose your topic, or if you've been given a general topic, you then need to refine your topic. So you would do this by asking some questions and brainstorming some ideas to help you narrow that focus. Then you would use some of those keywords that come up in your brainstorm process and that help you come up with the questions that you want to ask to then take that information to a database. And we use the Niagara College Library database because it's an excellent source of multiple scholarly journals, medical journals. It's very easy to use, and there's no paywall stopping you from accessing most of the sources. Then, once you've done some research and you've found the sources that you think are appropriate, you're going to evaluate those using the CRAP test that we discussed in a previous lesson about evaluating your sources. So you want to determine not only if the source is a credible source on its own, but if it is appropriate for your project. So this would be where you need to determine if it's going to fit within the scope of your topic in your writing. And then perhaps based off that, you might need to do more research and continue to go through this process. So it's a little bit of a cycle. I always recommend doing some sort of concept mapping or brainstorming in your research process. You cannot simply go from topic to essay or topic to finding sources to writing the essay. You need to do some pre-writing work. So this would be, you could write down the broad topic or your issue or, whatever your idea is that you're going to write about. And then around that, you want to write down maybe some relevant words, phrases, or ideas that come to mind. And these could be some of those key terms you could use to search for sources in your database search. It's helpful to draw lines between a new word to the topic to map them so you can see how some of these ideas might be connected. So some of those keywords you come up with might be connected to each other and they could be paired in your searching. Then you want to expand your map out further by writing down words that could act as subtopics. So these could serve as your supporting ideas, the topics for your body paragraphs, but not necessarily. That's not necessarily how that is always going to work, but it gives you a place to start. And then expand that out further. What words are connected to those subtopics? And then you continue to do this until you feel like you have a good idea of where your focus is going to be. You might start out with what you think is your topic, and then by concept mapping and brainstorming, going to the research, reading some things, go back to your concept map and brainstorm and see if there's anything else that you could add. You might actually refine or change your topic as you go. And that's definitely okay to do, as long as that's something that you've been given permission to, or it's within the time frame of what's appropriate for that assignment. The next thing you want to do once you feel like you have a good idea of what your topic is you want to formulate research questions. So these help focus your information needs. It helps you to determine what kind of evidence will I need? What kind of support am I looking for? It also helps you to identify some key search concepts, and then it helps you in your research process as you look for potential resources. So a good research question can help you focus your search on what you want to know. It focuses your information needs, identifies key search concepts, and points you in the direction of potential sources. When you are formulating research questions, it's important that you're using open-ended questions as opposed to closed questions. So you want to use what we call the journalistic approach, which is asking with questions that start with a WH question word. So who, what, when, where, why, and how. These will give you a much more broad answer with more details, as opposed to asking a yes or no question, which is really going to limit the availability of information that you can find. If we look at the example of infant vaccination as the topic, some possible questions that you might want to ask would be questions that start with something like, what is the value of blank? Or how is blank made or done? Or how should blank be made or done? So if you consider those kinds of questions and insert your topic into those blanks, perhaps some of the answers you get might open up more questions that you might ask, and it might broaden your topic ideas into a much wider list, which would then be more specific in nature. Next, it's time to start looking for some sources in your database search. So you're going to want to do an initial search and then adjust your question as needed. Remember that research is a dynamic process. It's not something that is a one and done. So you might do some initial searching and then realize you need to refine your topic or maybe change it altogether, and that is fine. So once you have an idea of the initial search, then identify some keywords. Try to think of maybe 2 to 4 keywords. If you use maybe like 1 or 2 words, then your results might not be specific enough and you might get way too many search results. Whereas if you use more than 4, if you use say 8 or 10 keywords in one search, then you're likely only going to get a few sources, which might be too limited, and you might be omitting some important search results. And when you're using your search, don't use your question. So you don't want to ask the question in the search box. So you don't want to use question words, but find key words. So searching for content words that you can help to find this information. There's a few terms that we like to use when it comes to what we identify as search terms. So sometimes we use keywords or synonyms, or sometimes you might hear related terms. And these actually are similar, but they're actually 3 different things. So keywords would be words that are the main idea of what you're trying to find. So you want to use relevant keywords in your search to get to the most accurate, best information for what you're trying to do. Synonyms would be words that have the same meaning or a similar meaning to your keywords, but it might open up more search results depending on who has used which kinds of terms. So synonyms and keywords are interchangeable. So that means that where one author might use word A, another author might use word B, and they have a similar meaning, but using, searching for keywords in one time and then synonyms for those keywords another might give you a bit more breadth of information and it might unlock some hidden sources that you may not have found otherwise. Then there are related terms, which generally have the same meaning as the keywords, but again, these are other words that are not necessarily synonyms, but they are related to the keyword and they're often used together. So think of something like a tablet versus a device. Not exactly the same thing. And if you search for tablet versus device, you may get different results. But depending on what kind of information you're hoping to get, playing around with these different related terms could yield better, more effective sources for what you are hoping to achieve. So this might be a little bit confusing. So here are a few slides to give you some examples. So if your research question or topic is, are text message reminders effective in maintaining lower blood sugars among teenagers with type 1 diabetes? Some of the keywords that you might pull from that research question are text message reminders, blood sugars, teenagers, type 1 diabetes. Now, of course, if you use just one of those in isolation, you're going to get different search results. You can't just search text message reminders and hope to get the information for this question. You have to kind of use a combination of these, but it really helps to pull out some of these keywords and phrases. Some synonyms. So we've identified our keywords. Now we want to find some synonyms for these. So a synonym that might be used for text message reminders could be SMS reminders. Blood sugars, synonyms could be blood glucose or glycemia. Teenagers might use other words like youth or high school aged, and type 1 diabetes is sometimes also referred to as juvenile diabetes. So you can see how if I search for text message reminders and I'm not getting a lot of results, I could simply switch that out for my synonym to see what kind of search results I might get. And then you have related terms. So email reminders for text message reminders. They are related, not exactly the same, but they are related and might possibly be used in similar contexts. We have hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, which are related to blood sugars. Teenagers, you could also search children or young adults. And type 1 diabetes, autoimmune disease. So again, you're not always going to get the same results, but it's helpful for finding the right kind of information you need. It's also helpful to know to use Boolean operators. So these are special words that you can add into your search terms to help either give you more results or more specific results, or it could help you to narrow your results. So if you're using the OR operator, which really means you're just typing in the word OR between terms, this will broaden your search results because it will give you results that contain both terms. And on the other hand, will narrow your search results because it will only show you results that contain both words. And then the NOT operator is something that can be helpful if you notice you're getting search results that are not exactly connected to what you want to discuss and you want to exclude some search results. You can add NOT before a search term and then it will eliminate those results from showing up in what's populated. This next section of the lesson is going to give you a little bit of a walkthrough of how to use the NC Library's Everything search. So there are resources on the NC Library's website that you can reference to get more information, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a guide to help you get started in case you wanted to start looking for research information. We've already talked about database searches, but I wanted to just make sure we understand a little bit more about what a database search is. So databases collect information from a wide variety of sources. These typically focus on scholarly academic sources like journal articles, but books, news articles might also appear. Chapters from books could also appear. So it really will give you a great variety of information. And they're designed to make your search more systematic. And so one of the ways it does this is how it handles your search terms and how you can refine your search results. So when you first do your initial search, you're likely going to get a lot of different sources. So then you'll need to limit using limiters, and we'll talk a little bit about what kind of limiters exist in the NC database. The Niagara College Libraries subscribes to many health science related databases. So this is really going to be helpful for when you're trying to get full text versions of primary and secondary sources, because you're not going to encounter a paywall when you access sources through the college library. And something else that's really helpful is you can save a reference to the sources you find in APA 7th edition within your search results. And I'll show you how to do that on one of the next slides. All students at Niagara College have access to the Niagara College Library website. To get to this quickly, if you're already logged into your MyNC portal, then you can navigate over the quick links in the top of your navigation bar. If you just hover over quick links, it'll bring a drop-down menu and just select libraries. And that will take you directly to the Niagara College Library website. This is where you're going to put in some of your search terms. So add in your topic or some keywords and then press search. So I'm going to show you some examples, and I've just added in a search term of polio vaccinations. The next page you get is going to look something like this. And it's called Page 1+. So if you hear that term or if you see that term, that's just the name of this results page. And the first thing you want to notice is the number of results you get. So here I've searched for polio vaccinations, and I've gotten over 12,000 search results, which is far too many for me to search through and determine which are the best sources. So I really need to refine my results. And the college library database has a great column for you to be able to do that, with lots of ways you can limit your results. So the first one you want to do is to check off available online, which means that you will be able to view the entire source online without having to track down a hard copy or There's nothing worse than reading an abstract and thinking, this is such a great source, I can't wait to read more about it and see how this is going to help me in my essay, and then realize that you don't have available access to the full text. So you want to check off available online under availability. And then the other one is always check off peer-reviewed journals. This is going to ensure that the information you're using has been reviewed by professionals in the field and they will be scholarly appropriate sources. Then further down, you will have lots of other ways that you can refine your results. So you can refine by the resource type, by the date. You can even select under subject terms, which will actually help you to search for your topic and those subject terms. So if you're looking for, polio vaccinations and you want to really focus more specifically on maybe the rate of incidence of polio, then you can find subject terms related to that. Or if you're looking for a specific country, it could help you to navigate that. So play around with that. See how narrowing the search results will get you different sources. And if you change up which kind of refining terms you're using, then it can definitely help you to make sure that you're finding the most appropriate results for what you need. Once you think you found a source that might be appropriate for what you want to do, click on that source and it will bring up a page that looks like this. You'll notice that there's a few important things you want to see here. So the first one that you can see is it says peer reviewed. So I can see this is an article. It tells me the title. Above it, it says article. So I can see exactly what type of source this is. I can see which part of the title it's pulled from as my search terms. And then below that short little quote, it has peer reviewed. So I know that this is going to be an appropriate source. Below that, it says Get PDF or Read Online or Available Online. So Get PDF will link me to the page where I can view or download a PDF copy. Read Online might direct me to the same source, or it could direct me to like a web page where I read that article in its web page form. And then Available Online will usually link me to a few different sources of where I can access that. So lots of ways I'm able to access this. Then what we see here is underneath where it says send to, there's a few little buttons of where you can save this information. So if you found a source and you think, yes, this is one that I definitely want to use, this is going to be helpful, I'll click on citation. And then in this box, I'm going to make sure I click APA 7th edition. And then I can see that they have taken the information from the source and put it into a reference list entry in APA 7th edition. So I can then copy that citation, save it to a Word document so that I can then put it in my reference page for my essay later. But then you have to make sure you double check for accuracy that the citation is in the correct format. It is coded to just pull the information from the source entry. So if the information was written in a different way, then you might note that there could be some errors. So always double check to make sure that it is in the correct format. Finally, the college has lots of helpful resources available to you, and I've linked a few here. So I've linked to 2 online tutorials through the college website. There's Generating Search Terms and What is a Library Database. These are optional library modules that you can work through, but if you're feeling a little bit confused or having a hard time with this, then those are great places to start. And then I've linked some other web pages to help you with citations and APA style. And if you have any other questions you might have about research, then there's a link for some assistance with your research.